like the principles that make for good art, I think also make for a good life. And it makes sense because art and life are so synonymous, really. I mean, we make art to be able to communicate the most personal ideas that we have, the most, the feelings and emotions that we have to other people. And we try to express them. But the first thing, though, for me that I notice is art often comes out of difficult life experiences. So, it's funny if you go into a museum. I was giving a talk at a museum somewhere, and I wanted to give a list of artists that had a disability. And then I couldn't find one that didn't. It suddenly became a search to find an artist that didn't have a disability or wasn't separated from their society in some way. There was something about them that made them different from the other people around them. And but that's what art's there. You don't do it unless you have something to say. So I found that kind of interesting. And this whole idea of being in the moment, it started helping the epilepsy as well. Like I think epilepsy is actually harder for people to deal with than blindness, because blindness is there, and it's there all the time. And once you learn to deal with it, you've learned to deal with it. Epilepsy, it can creep up any time. So if somebody has a hidden disability like that, it can be far harder to deal with, because most people don't know you have the disability, and so you're constantly worried. Like, if I go to work, am I going to have a seizure? But the painting, though, it made me calm down quite a bit about all of that, and it actually made the seizures better. I was taking better care of myself, and and I accepted myself. I always thought of the epilepsy as being like a monster that was always after me. It was this aspect of my life that I hated, so it was separate. And then I started to accept it, and I started to think, well, on some days I'm more like a James Bond martini, more shaken than stirred. And other days I'm kind of normal, but it's still me. Either way, that day is the way it's that day. So I deal with it, and I'm, this is John for Saturday. So maybe Sunday John will be better or worse. I don't know. We'll see. Other thing is to be courageous with your art. To take chances, to keep your mind open about things. And one artist that I'd really admire, Van Gogh. I think he really demonstrates that. And that's so true in your personal life too, though, to be courageous, to keep an open mind about everything. But Van Gogh, he used to be friends with Gauguin. And in 1888, they would often have lunch together. And there was, on December 23rd, they were having lunch. And then they got in this conversation. And there's some debate about all this. But the way the story goes, they were having some conversation, and Van Gogh really liked this girl. And he was very passionate about it. And Gauguin was like, whatever. And Van Gogh ended up cutting off part of his earlobe. Not his whole ear, just earlobe. It's kind of been inflated over the years, but they cut off part of his earlobe. And ever since that, two things happened. First thing, Van Gogh always ate lunch alone. Well, what is that guy going to cut off next? You never know. And Gauguin left pretty quickly. The other thing was that he became sort of the poster child of this mentality, the idea of an artist thinking out of the box or taking things to extremes, taking your passion to extremes. But there's something about Van Gogh, though, that I think is interesting too, is that he was crazy, but he was sort of driven crazy. He had epilepsy, but at the time that he had it, people didn't know what epilepsy was. So people just thought he had these crazy humors in him. He would have epileptic fits, and they just saw it as madness. And of course, he saw it as madness. And the thing that I think is interesting about that is that what saved me in my life are the people around me, like the place that I was, the family, the friends, all through my life. And if Van Gogh had that, like if he had been born in this day and age, it would have been a completely different story. May not have been as good a story. I don't know, but it would have been a different story. But he wouldn't have been potentially maybe not as tormented. It just drives home to me every time I think about Van Gogh that to appreciate the people that are around me.